So this is an unusual tangy ketchup show we got here going. It's just you and me, Sam. This
It
is
feels so odd.
I know, but the people have been writing in and they said that we don't have chemistry, and we're here to prove them wrong.
That'd be funny. Well, I know you and Joe have chemistry, obviously, because you guys have done a few shows without me. So
Well, we had to. I mean, we have no choice, right? You're
always on the road.
50%, yeah, on the road,
I'd
filling in
say
for
I'm higher
someone.
than 50
No, of course you are. Of course you are. You come back. You
after
come back
10
a lot.
years.
All right, so I'm going to do the Joe thing. Welcome to another edition of Command Control Power. This is one of our public shows. If you'd like to hear some of our super secret squirrel shows, we always encourage you to take a look at our Patreon page. And for a nominal fee, you get access to our entire catalog.
Look at that. Well, so I'll start us off, Jerry, if you want. I mean, I got a personal story about my own Mac migration. I finally ponied up for a new M4 MacBook Pro.
Oh,
I've
wow.
been
Okay.
Yeah, I know. I've been using the M1 for a few years, and it's kind of done its job. It sits clamshell in my desk in a holder, and I have my big screen, and that's kind of where it sits until I have to travel. And I
Mhm.
take it out. I have a privacy screen on it for the plane and stuff. But it did its job. I really honestly didn't have a lot of complaints. But as of the last few months, I really started to see that I was taxing it. Like it would just start to get loud. Things would pause. I would really not be able to get the job done. And I'd be extremely frustrated having to, kill processes and even not just apps, just kill processes that were running in the background. It was just getting pretty bad. So
Mhm.
I finally decided, you know what? I'll just pony up for it. It's been a few years. I think I can do it. So I got an M4, and I have a time machine backup to a Synology in my house, and that's been working fine. I check it every once in a while. It's still working. But I was going to do a Mac to Mac migration, and I was surprised that it didn't work out for me. So essentially, I just fired up the new Mac, did the normal thing that you do with choosing Migration Assistant. Oh, actually, let me pause for a moment. I tried Migration Assistant right out of the gates in Setup Assistant. Didn't work. And so I remember Joe in my head, create the first user first, then go in
Sure.
and use Migration Assistant. I was like, that's probably that little quirk. So I did
And
that.
make sure the computer's completely updated before you run the migration with the placeholder user.
Right. Yeah. So I set up like a temp admin, I think I called it or whatever. And then I fired up my old Mac and I put it in migration mode to, set up to transfer to a new Mac. And they showed the codes. Everything looked fine there. And it
Mhm.
spun for a while and then it just said failed to migrate or something along those lines. And I did the usual stuff, rebooted, tried doing a couple things, hopped on one foot, swung a dead cat, all the things that we like to say. Nothing, just would not migrate. And,
And there was no cable involved in this process at all.
yes, no cabling. I was just trying it
Mhm.
over my
Over
Wi-Fi.
the air. Mhm.
And so,
Peer to
honestly,
peer.
yeah, honestly, it wasn't a priority one to get this Mac up and running. I could still I had another spare Mac that I was using. So I was like, all right, you know what? I'll just leave those two guys alone and I'll do a migration from the Synology backup.
Okay.
And it picked up the
Here,
Synology backup.
hang on one second there.
Yeah.
So Joe's got a secret recipe for that he covered on a previous show. I think you were there for this one because that's what I had to do when my MacBook Air went flying off my car and I got a temporary one to use. Do you recall
Yeah.
that from you weren't there for that part of the story. Maybe you weren't there. See, this is why you got to listen and attend the show, Sam,
I'm
because you get
assuming I
these.
listened afterwards for the show notes, but who
But
knows?
it's in my case, I want to hear what happened to you. It took hours to do the time machine. I had to plug right into the rack. I put the computer down by the rack, and it
Yeah.
took hours and hours and hours to recover from that Synology. So what happened?
Yeah, same thing. I just turned on my AC in the house in case you noticed I was on my phone. I was like, it's blazing hot in here. So yeah, same difference. I basically start up the Synology restoration and it took a little while to find the backup. And at
Mhm.
first it was in use because my computer was actively backing up. So I sorted through all that and I got it to start the process. And just like you said, I mean, it said it was going to take like, I forget the equivalent of like 6 days, You know, it was moving at a freaking snail's pace. But like I said, I wasn't too concerned because I had an extra laptop. So I just said, screw it, I'll leave it. This was one afternoon. And by the next morning, it said it still had like 12 hours left. And it finally finished about, I want to say like 22 hours in, something like that.
Wow.
I know. And if I was, doing this for a customer, or if I was, in trouble and I really needed this fired up, I would have probably taken greater pains to try and correct this or cable it in or do something. But like I said, I wasn't too concerned, so I left it, but it was 22 freaking hours.
So you were doing that over Wi-Fi too?
Yeah, I was doing it over Wi-Fi.
Oh, because in my case, I plugged right into the network, but it still took hours. Now, how many gigabytes, roughly speaking, were we talking about transferring?
Ooh, I wish I could remember. I think, minus all my cloud-based data, it was like 200 something. It wasn't terrible. 200 something.
Oh,
gigabytes.
that's actually less than I had.
Yeah.
I probably had around half a terabyte.
Yeah, that's pretty chunky right there.
Mm.
But, it ended up working. Like once it was done, I fired up the new Mac and things were working well, minus the normal stuff that you have to do, re-signing into iCloud. A couple of apps, it was interesting. A couple of apps wouldn't load. That was kind of interesting to me. Like it was a generic error, like it could not be opened, and I had to re-download the app on a couple of occasions. That was a little strange, and little interesting things here and there that always shows that you need to like launch the apps and everything for the customer before you walk away, because all these little idiosyncrasies and issues might happen as a result of
right, of course.
But
well, you're really brave though to want to do that over Wi-Fi. I mean,
I know it was kind of bold.
So you're like me, you had really no other option, right? Well, you could have gone back to computer and tried, even gotten a Thunderbolt cable, which would have been significantly faster. But I don't know. I've had, I'm sorry, not to monopolize the conversation here, but I've had mixed results sometimes. The earlier the M series, it's almost like the Thunderbolt cable isn't like a rocket. Whereas if you've got at least an M2 or an M3 to an M4, it's significantly faster with the cable.
Yeah, I would imagine so. I mean, my M1 has served me well, but it's definitely not the equivalent of the current processor speeds.
Now, was there anything in your decision-making process when you decided to get the Pro over the MacBook Air? Did the MacBook Air factor in at all, or not really?
Oh yeah, so I have a couple of spare Mac computers here and there that I've used for different things, like maybe for a customer. I still have an Intel one that I keep around for certain things. But last year I bought an M1, or not M1, it was an M2 Air. I'll check the model because it's downstairs. But I bought that for testing because I needed to wipe another current Silicon Mac to do things for testing, like automated device enrollment stuff. That ended up being my secondary computer when I wasn't using it for that. So I'm so lazy that when I go downstairs from my office to let's say the kitchen or the living room, that I don't want to take my Mac out of the clamshell mode, because first of all, it resizes all my windows and everything like that. So I'm so lazy that I set up this other Mac. So when I go downstairs, I just open the lid on that one. Sure. And that's an Air. And that one really, if I'm going full speed, working hard, it really starts to hurt. Like it can't do what I want it to do as fast as I need it to do it.
16 gigs of RAM?
16 gigs. Yeah.
Okay. And that's an M2.
Yeah. So that was my decision making there. This one has 24. I bought a 24 gig on this one, but so far so good on that. But yeah, the Air, I don't know, man. I've had a couple of times where I tried the Air for my personal computer. It just doesn't cut it for me.
Yeah. So, I mean, the Pro, the screen's brighter. The screen's significantly brighter in the number of nits. And also, you've got a little bit better sound on the Pro. Did you get the small screen or the big screen?
The 14 or 16, you mean? 14-inch.
Nice. Because you're on planes and you gotta, you don't want to get jammed in the tray, in the drop-down tray.
I think I mentioned this on the show, but I almost cracked my screen one time when someone reclined and it was just got jammed right in there. I was like, like I put my hand up to the back of his headrest.
That's wild.
Like, stop.
And so how many days have you had it since we're, on this day of broadcast?
I'd say, let's see, probably 8 days, I'd say.
And would you say you're, air quotes, rocking the MacBook Air right now?
I'm crushing it, man. Yeah, no, I like the Pro a lot. And like I said, it's sitting in the.
Yeah, I said
tray.
Air. I meant Pro. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's doing. I mean, it's sitting where the other one was. So like, it's kind of funny. It doesn't really make a major difference in terms of appearance for me. Of course, it's got the what's the new color called? Whatever it is, midnight, is it? I can't remember, but it's looking pretty in its holder in front of my screen here.
So you got the one with the bluish tinge? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I can't remember the name of the colors, but
yeah, my wife got that. We got her an M4 MacBook Air, and it looks the same as my silver one. So I really can't tell the difference. Well, that's great. Good luck with that. I mean, maybe you could podcast more with it. Think about that.
I'll be around. It'll make me be around more.
All right.
I'm getting on the road tomorrow, actually, but that's why we're recording today. So all good for us.
Yeah. Just like the old days, just like the pre-pandemic old days for you, Sam.
I'm trying to rack up my airline miles so I can go somewhere cool again, but
I'm not sure you'd be welcome there. From everything I'm reading on the news, there's all this pushback against tourism.
Yeah, all depends. Well, you do quite a bit of traveling too. I mean,
you could get stoned in Barcelona. Well, the last time I did any kind of major, yeah, that's right. Any major travel was in 2023, and things have really changed if you're keeping your nose to the headlines.
Yeah,
it's not pleasant out there. So for the listeners who might be somewhat familiar, tell us a little bit about your pedigree of when you say you go out on the road. Tell people what you're doing as much as you feel comfortable sharing. Like not the government work or the espionage that you're doing in
well, now you just let
Iron Curtain countries. Yeah.
No, I mean this trip tomorrow is actually a personal trip just for a couple of days. But
here we go. You and Joe, you guys are living the life.
No, it's not for fun. It's just a personal trip I have to take. But
all right.
Going out to California.
I'll let you off this time.
Yeah, thanks. No, it depends. This year it's been a lot of conferences, I would say, or events that are vendor related and stuff like that. But sometimes I'll go out on the road and do classes for Apple or something like that. Those are fun for me because it's usually meeting people that have kind of known in the field here and there. And that you don't really get to see in person. So those are kind of fun. But I like getting out of the house. I gotta, the pandemic was tough for me because I like moving around and going to different places. But in terms of my similarity to Joe, I will say that when I travel, I do try to tack on a couple of extra days to the trip, wherever it is, to try and do some hiking or just exploring or just being out in the open. But usually it's by myself, which drives my wife crazy because she thinks something's going to happen. I'm going to get attacked by a cougar or something. So I have my personal protection on me when I'm traveling.
Now, do you your Bowie knife or your Cub Scout knife? Now, do you actually turn on the Find My so that she can, from the Connecticut, she can track you wherever you are in the world? Like
I got
Waldo.
I also got a little sat texting device. It doesn't make calls, but it was on Joe's recommendation.
Oh yeah.
So that, where there's no signal, I pay Garmin like a fee for that when I'm traveling, and you can ping me. And what I'll do sometimes is just turn it on during my hikes and she can see my trail on a map and where I'm going, which is actually kind of cool. And
folks, when he's in government skiffs that he's not telling us about, Sam does a lot of top secret work that he doesn't even want to reveal.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. And you work for, you don't work for Jamf, but you're a Jamf instructor too, right?
Yeah, that doesn't require too much travel. So it kind of sits me in my room, Now,
take us back a little bit. I know very little about the Jamf arc in their development, but there was a time when if you wanted Jamf for your institution, you would need to buy hardware, right? And those days are gone now.
Well, you could buy hardware when they did they still do on-prem servers, but most people are moving to cloud unless the the industry that you're working in or something requires it to be on site.
So
But
did
yeah,
that change for you in terms of the work? Did the work less work because of the fact that there was this cloud-based infrastructure, or it was still the same?
it was kind of the same. Just like it was less of a hassle. I mean, I didn't have to like install the server and go through all the back end stuff and get SQL working. And that was years ago. But yeah, it's certainly a lot easier with cloud for sure.
So you would need a day of prep, or you would do that ahead of time in your lair?
No, that's not something really you can really do ahead of time because you have to get
Okay,
access to the client site and all that. So you have to meet
I
them,
see.
do the handshaking and all that stuff and then get started.
And so is that when you had the fleet of computers that you would bring with you, or that's the Apple stuff that you're doing?
Yeah, that's what both. But yes, I used to carry a Pelican case with me. I feel like I'm being interviewed here. Are you
Well,
interviewing me for
we
a
don't.
job or what's
You're,
going on?
well. If I was going for a job, I wouldn't be interviewing you. You'd be interviewing me, I think. No, we got to find out more about you. You're the dark, mysterious one here on the show.
Oh,
I don't
that's
mean physically dark. I just mean, you move in strange ways.
yeah. I move in strange ways. I love it.
Yeah.
Some of my clients move in strange ways. I don't know about yours, but I mean, I feel like I'm always. I feel like half the time I'm protecting. Usually, the top end person in the company, I'm protecting them from themselves. Like,
Hmm.
I feel like the CEOs or the owners, no matter how small or big the business, they're always the one. Ooh, I hit my mic. They're always the one making like just uninformed decisions and rash decisions too, where you got to like get them to pump the brakes. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, yeah. On a most recent show, I discussed this architect client who just loves to go in there and just make everything like set things on fire. And then he calls me up that nothing's working. And he's happy to pay the bills, which so I shouldn't really complain, but it's never really a lot. It's just more annoying. Like, why do you touch it? Why are you even doing that?
Yeah. It's like it's the tinkerers, it's the ones that also feel like I got to save a few bucks here, so we're going to shave this off and shave that
Yeah.
off. I'm like, no, 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 no,
Yeah.
no, no. You don't understand what will happen if you do that. Talk to me
Or we're
first.
going to save money if we don't call Sam.
Yeah. Well, yeah, shaving IT off is just. I'm actually dealing with that with a customer right now. Great customer. I actually like them a lot, but they feel like they're not worthy of like security protection and things of that. No, we're not. We're small time. No one's going to come
Mhm.
after us, kind of a thing. And I'm like, well, no, that's not necessarily the way it works. Like, that someone might target you because of the industry that you're in or that you handle transactions, and they can gain financially from that. So
That's
it's tough
right.
sometimes when they're like, I don't really need it, and you have to convince them that the world might fall apart and that you're there to protect them if it does, but they don't see it happening until it's too late.
Yeah, I think that's a battle we all face where everybody feels like it's just not going to happen to them, and they don't have the exposure. And like you hear the things that you just said, like, oh, we're not IBM, so no one's who's going to attack us, and it's just ridiculous. And then they're compromised, and you're on speed dial, and they're calling you all day long.
Speaking of which, I'm actually one of the clients that doesn't have protection. They're going through an issue where whenever they hire a new employee, like within minutes, they're getting fished at like saying, "Hey, this is the CEO of the company. I want you to do X, Y, and Z, and give me your phone number and stuff like that." And
Wow.
I'm trying to use that as a show of to show, hey, listen, guys, this is what happens. Like one of your employees is going to fall for this, or many, and
Hmm.
we really need to put safeguards in place because it's the problem with we've all been in this business for a number of years, so it's like you have those legacy clients where they've been kind of hanging around and doing their thing and nothing bad happens to them, and so now all of a sudden you're trying to be like, you need protection. They're like, no, I don't need that. I've been working with you for 10 years, we're fine.
Hmm.
Those are the
Hmm.
hardest to convince, I feel like.
Yeah, the world's a much different place than it was 10 years ago. So what do you do? Like, what's the first uh, measure that you take to get them on the right path? I mean, if there's one kind of go-to technology, or what would that be besides two-factor or
Yeah.
MFA?
I probably personally would say user training, like, the know befores and the phishing campaigns that other companies do, because I always tell them straight up, I'm like, listen, the user is the weakest link. This is
Mhm.
without a doubt the weakest link. So train them better and you'll be protecting yourself more than, even a firewall. I mean, like, a person will be the absolute person that clicks that button and goes, whoops, after the fact. And so I usually, because we do this like per device and per user billing, which I've talked about previously on shows. And at least I try and get them the per user part and be like, you have to have this. You have to have email protection. You have to have, we all know about MFA, and you have to have some way of training the user to know that they're the one that's susceptible to doing the wrong thing.
Now, I know you've been using for a while now, Know Before, and I tried another company, and I just found that their training was real primitive. I mean,
Mm.
not even like, even if I assume the role of Mr. Customer, it was really dumb stuff. But you evidently they've been doing a pretty good job for you, Know Before, because you still are using them. I mean, in your meetings with other people around the world, have you come across anybody who's really talking up some new product that we all need to take a look at
So
for training?
yeah, so it's funny that you say that, because one of the things that I actually had this in my notes to talk about at some point in one show, but
Hmm.
one of the things I'm struggling with, and this kind of comes back to what you asked, but is like I'm using so many different services for different things. Like we've talked about
Sure.
Backupify, and I talked about Know Before, and I got this and I got that, and it's really hard to manage it. And when prices change and do all this and pull from each vendor to set up a new client, it's just, I don't know, it's a hassle. So I don't know about you, but I tend to ignore marketing from LinkedIn and stuff. I'm just like, I'm
Oh
always
yeah.
like, I'm like, whatever. But this one company reached out that seemed legitimate, and I have a meeting with them to test their product. It's called Rotate. And they have the stuff we've been talking about. I'm looking at their one pager or whatever right now, which is like, phishing and training, identity management, email management, endpoint management for like protection on the devices. And I'm like, wouldn't it be amazing if I had one product? It doesn't have to be Rotate, but like one product that's like,
Hmm.
boom, I deploy that for my customer. I bill them based on that, and it's freaking done. And I
Hmm.
would absolutely love that. So, in a roundabout way to answer your question, I'm looking at options like Rotate that could be a one-stop shop for everything.
Okay, because we're looking to you for the answers, and then we just glom onto whatever you decided to do, and then that makes us all
I
look
don't think
good.
that's true. I think history will show us that Jerry has been first, and then Joe and I are like, no, 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 and then like 6 months later, I do it, and then 9 months later, Joe does it, or something like that.
But ironically, I'm the cheapest person here. I'm the least inclined to spend money for technology services, some
Yeah,
SaaS.
but you're also, I don't know, you find this stuff, and you're like, have you guys seen this? And Joe and I are usually like, no, tell us more. So it's just like we rely on you for the beta releases,
I don't know. So see, he's puffing me up, folks, because I'm giving him the third degree here as we talk to him, and our chemistry here. He's trying to make me twist in the wind a little bit. So he's
No,
trying to puff me up first, and then he's gonna stick the knife in.
I don't work that. I'll do that behind the scenes. But I am curious about this. Again, I have not seen their product yet, but like I said, Rotate's just one of them. But I'm curious to see if something like this would be good, because I asked them, I'm like, hey, do you guys use a service like Know Before and just kind of put it in there and say this is our bundle? And they said no, it's all something we've created. So that
Mhm.
was also interesting to me, to just see if something like that could work. But I'll be willing to give it a test run if they offer it for like a trial.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. There's all these companies out there that are trying to reinvent the wheel and try to do the same thing that other companies are doing, and nobody's really doing it that successfully. You still have to, like you said, micromanage and compartmentalize and take this piece from this and this piece from that and kind of cherry pick and put your package together.
Right.
And Yeah, but it's great to, be aware, because things change so quickly that, we may be talking about this product a year from now.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see. I think they're relatively new from what I understand, but there are a few products in there that, or out there, I should say, that I'm going to probably start looking at. And I look to Mac Admin Slack too to see what people are using and seeing what could be helpful and doesn't break the bank. That's the other piece. Like
Hmm.
what was it? A company just reached out to me. Oh, it was Lion Guard.
Hmm.
So I met, or we all did, I think, a couple of
At
aces
ACES.
ago. Yeah.
Hmm.
And I was really, really hot on them because it seemed very cool in terms of the security reporting and single dashboard and all that stuff. But it just didn't work because they also didn't have a Jamf plugin. And anyway, the guy reached out and he had some new AI stuff. And I'm like, listen, I just literally changed my pricing with my clients. Like if I
Hmm.
say now I have something new and it's now $5 more a computer or whatever, they're going to kill me.
Hmm.
So I politely said no to that because I was just like, it's not the right time. But with something like this, if it comes in at or below my current price point, then it's a no-brainer.
Right, right. It's an interesting time in terms of dealing with your existing clients and potentially new clients. Joe and I have mentioned on other shows how there seems to be a little bit of a downturn in actually finding new work, and your existing work, you were, at least personally, I'm looking at them a lot more carefully and trying to put out a little bit more goodwill, where in the past maybe I might have charged him for a 10 or a 15-minute session. Now, I just send out a notification that, this was complimentary and we appreciate your business. Just because, it's, I feel like these are uncertain times. And like you said, people are looking to save money any way they can. And if they don't intrinsically feel like they're getting enough value or enough reward, even though we know that, like, we're protecting them and we're keeping them from having problems, and they don't have problems, a lot of times what we're doing is very transparent to them. And they just assume, like, say, like, well, I don't really know what I'm paying for here. And
Yeah.
you try to gently have them stay with you, but they tend to sometimes want to move on.
No, I hear you 100%. I mean, the uncertainty scares all of us, but I think especially holding on to those legacy clients where maybe you don't do a lot for them every month, but they still get a bill
Mhm.
from you. I'm
Right.
always fearful, as I'm sure you are, that one day someone's going to look at the bill and be like, why are we paying MacWorks this month? Like, like just out of nowhere. And then you get the dreaded phone call or something. And that scares me. It honestly does. So sometimes you got to do something like what you were saying. And just, I think in marketing terms, like even call it like a lost leader or something, where you do something for free to just that goodwill and just let them know, hey, we're here and we're doing stuff for you.
Right.
I'd like to
Right.
help you out.
And trying to be more responsive.
Yeah.
On our last show, Joe was talking about the fact that he administrates his business several states away, hundreds of miles away, and his job is always creating those interactions with clients, albeit whether it's over the phone or through email, and constantly trying to find ways to, squeeze the lemon. Those are my terms, not his terms.
Yeah.
To keep on generating that cash flow. Like, oh, we noticed your MacBook Air is a little bit old. Have you thought about refreshing it? We can certainly help you on board that. And those sorts of interactions. And those, as we discussed, can be very tiring over time.
Yeah. I think in addition to that kind of stuff, like I think MDM can help us, or the remote management overall, because you can show them certain things behind the scenes that occur. Like what I just did recently for some of my clients was do a new automated enrollment setup that's like using some more modern visuals and stuff. Because in the past I used a free tool called DEP Notify, which has long since been kind of defunct. And I created a new setup for them, which didn't take me too much labor once I got it done for one client. So I was able to like rinse and repeat for others.
Mm-hmm.
And I showed them, as if they onboard a new employee, I'm like, check it out next time, see how modern and new it is and all that stuff. And I did it just because I was able to do it kind of easily, I did it free of charge just to show them something new and for them to get that wow factor of a visual coolness,
Nice.
So that
So
was a
you
good
were
thing too. Yeah.
creating value in their
Trying,
eyes. Yeah. Yeah.
trying, man. Like it's like you said, it's a little uncertain right now. It's a little scary.
Hmm.
Someone's trying to sell a house and they're, it's not what it was even a few months ago. Right now, people are a little worried to make a new purchase or, move to a new neighborhood or whatever. So everything's a little wonky, as they
Yeah.
say.
I think people are focusing more on the basic essentials. Like they realize they do need their electronics, their phone, their devices, maybe do an upgrade, but we're kind of an add-on to that. And a lot of times, we might be one of the first things to go, at least for a little while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying, man. It's just like the one I mentioned earlier in the show, like where we were protecting CEOs from themselves. It's a similar thing where they were using services for signatures, and they were like, "Well, I don't want to pay this per year because it's getting really expensive because we have a lot of employees." I'm like,
Is that something like Stamp or what were they
"Yeah,
using?
yeah." And if you look at it, the greatest thing that helps me there is if you go to Microsoft's like their Learn Hub or whatever you call it, and you look up their signature options. There are ways through 365 of like deploying they call it a disclaimer, but like a same thing in everyone's mail client. But it says does not do HTML, does not do images, does not do this. If you need any of this, use a third-party tool. It says it right in Microsoft documentation. So it's great because I just take that. I'm like, here's what Microsoft says. Don't go, because they were like, Microsoft does signatures on their own, and I'm like, don't do that. Just don't.
Yeah.
But at least they write it in there.
Yeah, that does get expensive, and of course, it becomes really complicated trying to create signatures on the Mac. And there's a couple of janky companies that try to do it, but when I've looked at it in the past, Stamp was the easiest. It was kind of like cross-platform in terms of working in Outlook and working in Apple Mail and working on the iPhone.
Yeah.
So, yeah, sometimes you got to try to save where you can, and other times, you just have to bite the bullet and spend for the technology. It's like one of those things that comes up quite frequently on the show is, do we need a product like Splashtop when most of that is baked into Adigy?
Yeah.
And I still pay for both. I pay for Adigy, and I also still pay for the Splashtop to get that SOS feature, where it's just quick deployment for the Splashtop client.
Well,
and so,
I'm sure. Do you have some clients that maybe are not in Adigy, so you need it for
yes,
them?
of course. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Or the one-offs, and sometimes you can, somebody calls you out of the blue and, you're ready to go and you spend a couple hours on the phone with them. And, that could be like $600. So that like pays for the year. So why not?
Yeah. But, I'm thinking about this. Are you also, maybe we always are, but are you also looking at cutting expenses? Because I'm realizing right now that I wasn't doing a good job of paying attention to all my expenses. And now I'm like laser focusing and trying to see, why do we need this or why do we need that? Do you go into like your QuickBooks regularly and try and weed that stuff out?
Well, I have a spreadsheet, where I keep track of what I'm paying for these subscription services when they expire, what the annual rate is or what the monthly rate is for the item. And so, I don't look at it like 7 times a month, but maybe once or twice a month I might look at it, or maybe once every couple of months, but I try to keep a handle on what's going out the door.
Yeah. I think I haven't it's funny. Personally, I look at every cent. And in the business, I was realizing I was kind of throwing my hands away and just being like, oh, it's fine. I know, we're doing the right thing. And that's not the right approach at all. I have a few people with us, so there could be expenses on their company card, let's say, that I'm not paying attention to. So this month, especially, I've been kind of going through and starting to weed out stuff or just look for stuff that might be unnecessary, or at least ask the question, what's this for?
So are you talking about like subscription services, or this is just keeping track of your employees' credit cards? company
I
credit
think
cards.
I think mostly subscription or things that we pay for that might be annual and you don't see them come
Yeah.
around.
Yep.
You
Yep.
know, we've been pretty good, but I don't know. Do you still use like services like Text Expander? That's a good one, but that one comes around once a year.
Yeah, and don't we I think as ACNs we get that off 50% off or
I
something
think
like
so.
that. So
Yeah.
yeah, and it's built into other technologies that I use. Like I use something called Alfred, and they have a text snippet expander thing, and it's going to, of course, be built into. It's going to be further expanded in the latest Mac OS. But yeah, I would probably re-up on text expander just because it's just something I know, and it's not a lot of money for me. But
Right.
it adds up, like you say, when you have not just yourself, it becomes more challenging because these costs of these technologies can escalate out of control very quickly, especially with like Adobe subscriptions. It's crazy
Oh
what some
yeah.
of my clients pay for the individual seats. Well, we don't want the Adobe standard. We need the one that has the signatures in it. So it's like you have to pay up for that, and pretty soon you're into like $300 or $400 a month just for Acrobat. Let's say
Adobe
that's a lot
is
of money. Yeah,
that's like I feel like they're the mafia of software applications. They have it cornered and they can charge whatever the F they want.
yeah, yeah.
Hey, interesting. Benjamin Morales just posted in the chat. Espanso is free, open source, and pretty powerful. I just looked them up. They're basically an open source text expander, which is kind of interesting. So
That is cool. We'll have to put that in our show notes.
yeah, heck yeah. I just bookmarked that so I can check it out later.
Is it Expanso, or if you're listening live, or it's Espanso?
Espanso, like Espanol.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but I'm always curious about stuff like. But you're right. I mean, I guess what I'm looking at more, not to harp on this too much, but what I'm starting to look at is, yeah, that might only be $20 a month, but that's $240 a year. And do I really need that? And if I look at, four of those expenses, that's $1,000. Just I'm trying to pay attention to everything just to be smarter about not blowing things off because it's little, because all of those littles add up. And I think that's my focus as I'm trying to pay more attention to the financial aspect of the business that I feel like sometimes I neglect and I really shouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, it's on the one hand, you could be listening to what we're saying, and we're saying, oh, like these guys are being really frugal, and that's kind of silly because you're making money, so you got to spend money to make money, and if this helps your employee do his job faster, then what are you worried about? But
Yeah.
I think it cuts both ways. A typical story I tell is when I got out of college, I worked at the family tool and die shop, right? And so they would do this once in a while where they would look at expenses and they'd say, we gotta cut back. And then the water guy would walk in to deliver the bottles of water, and they're like, how much are we spending for that water? Well, we're gonna have the guys bring in their own water. So pretty soon the water would stop, and then in the shop, you would have your uniform services come in, and they would be the work rags that we would use. And we didn't wear smocks. We wore like lab coats, like white lab coats or blue
Oh,
lab coats.
you got
Yeah,
pictures?
very fancy. And so we'd be like, well, we're going to wash those. We're going to wash those. So, I was new in the company. So we were going through one of those phases where we were going to cut back. Right. So like, we're going to have Jerry, he's going to take down the lab coats, and he's gonna wash them for us. So I get all the lab coats, and in the tool and die business, we would have like milling machines and turning centers and lathes and CNC lathes. So a lot of them had cutting oil, and inevitably you'd get a little bit of cutting oil on you, and you wouldn't want that on your clothes. And that's kind of like why you wore these coats. And you wear the coat for a couple of days and you swap it out for a fresh one, and the uniform service would take it, and it would come back and it would be clean again. It would be nice. So I take these things down to the local laundromat and I put them through one of the larger industrial washing machines. So, everything was like not really looking bright and blue when they came out. They all had a grayish tinge to them. And I kid you not, this happened to me. So I put them in the dryer and I leave. And I come back probably 20 minutes later, figuring, they're almost done. And I see, and nobody's panicking about this, but I see black smoke coming out of the dryer vent at the top of the industrial dryers. They have, the ones that would be in a wall of dryers. Well, they're vented at the top, and this black smoke is, so what it was just the cutting oil it wasn't on fire, but it was heating up and it was drying out and it was creating this black smoke. So, and so inevitably we went back to the uniform service, and, we had the guy come in and bring the bottled water. But, and this is just like the worst thing you could do for your employees, especially when they have here's some, a helpful tip is like, if you have a service, right? Like Text Expander, you say, okay, we're going to try Espanso now. If it doesn't work at least as good as Text Expander, eat the cost. Because it's easier to give somebody something lesser than to take something that's better and pull it away from them as one of their work tools. So I don't know.
True. I mean, if you're going to hurt your employees' performance or your own performance, then, it may not be worth it.
But we're saving money. We're washing our own aprons. Now they look gray. They used to look blue, and they're gray now, and they smoke, and they smell like burnt smoke.
I wasn't sure if everyone get the reference, but when you were saying the smoke was coming out of the laundromat, I was like, what are you making, meth? Because I was thinking about Breaking Bad and the laundromat, but it's like, I'm not sure everyone will get that reference. Yeah, but that's, I remember one company that I worked for before this whole HCS venture, they started taking away water bottles. Like that was a thing. We got water bottles and other stuff. Like we walk in and just grab it from the fridge. And they started to remove the water bottles. And like, I think 2 months later, like they laid off like a third of their workforce. I should have seen the writing on the wall.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Well,
I survived that, even though I was a newbie at the company. Somehow I didn't get laid off, but.
Well, you were this. It was a newspaper or something, right? You were doing typesetting, or what was something you having to do? You were doing something unique, right? I remember you telling us.
Yeah, back then I used Quark that was a different company, but I was helping like publish book, like someone would write a book or something, and I would have to format it properly in Quark and then send it on to the publisher or something. I can't remember but my job was. To use a Mac and make sure everything was formatted properly and then send it on its way. But this company was a healthcare company that it was called Ventive Health. I remember the name, it's been so many years. And my colleague actually, who was there before, I think I've told the story, but it's probably been a decade, but he was there before me, and he asked me what I was making, which I guess you don't kind of talk about those things. I was a new hire.
Not really, no. Yeah.
But I told him, and he goes, "What the F?" He goes, "That's like $5,000 more than me." And he had been there for like 2 years.
Wow.
So he was super pissed. And then he was one of the guys that got laid off, unfortunately, when they cut back. But it was crazy. I like talking about our old. I can't believe you wore a white lab coat. That's hysterical.
And of course, Quark is still in business.
Yeah.
They're not US based. They're somewhere offshore, but you can actually get it, and it works with the Apple Silicon. It's amazing.
I don't know anybody that uses Quark. I don't know about you, but
we have one old school client that still uses it.
Really?
Yeah. And she's got 2 underlings that use it because it's just what they used, and it's still around, and they just continue to use it. So,
and it works.
Old habits die. Yeah, old habits die hard sometimes for these people.
I didn't know Quark is a dairy product. I just looked it up when we were talking. Did you know that?
I didn't know that's what it meant. No.
The finished product is firm, creamy, and looks a bit like cottage cheese.
Wow.
I did not know that.
And is that like a Dutch word or something like that?
I don't know. I just looked at it real quick. So, but it's also an elementary particle. There's a couple different definitions for Quark.
Okay.
But that's kind of interesting.
So, apropos of nothing, when you go out on the road, let's say you're going to be away at a conference, or you're you obviously take your power brick, you've got an Apple Watch, or are you wearing a Garmin now?
No, I got an Apple Watch.
Okay, so you got the Apple Watch, you got some AirPods. Are you taking anything that's not Apple issued with you?
My charger
Like
isn't.
all right,
Oh,
what are you using for a charger? People want to know these things.
shoot, this would be something good for the show. My wife actually bought it for me for Christmas, and it's like it's a like a fold out wireless charger. I
Oh,
can
it's
probably
a
look
three
up
in
all the
one.
time. Yeah.
Yep,
So I put my
and that works
AirPods, my
well.
watch, my phone, and it works awesome. I love that
You
thing.
get rapid charging off of it.
Yeah, it's really really great. Um, I'll try and look it up before the show's over so I can at least post it in the show notes. But yeah, that's not Apple issued, but it gets the job done. Like when I'm sitting on at the hotel room, really easy to
Now, how
plug
about when
in.
you're on the plane? I noticed what is it, 12 South, that makes some really groovy Apple product stands, but they make that product called the AirFly, where you could jack it into the headphone jack on the airplane, and then through Bluetooth, your AirPods will get the audio. Do you
Oh
do
yeah,
anything
I know that
special
product.
like that?
Do you have it?
Well, I used it on my
Ooh,
most recent trip.
it's called AirFly, right?
Yeah, they've got a couple different versions. There's one actually, if you're traveling with your spouse or significant other, you can both share the same audio. So let's say you're watching the same thing at the same time on the plane.
I remember my wife and I did that. I think on our honeymoon, I bought one of those 2-in-1s, and
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think it was the Born Identity or something. I don't know. I remember us like huddling together with two different sets of headphones.
Do you remember when Steve Jobs in one of the keynotes talked about, the wired AirPods, and he said you could share it with a friend?
No, I don't remember that.
And yeah, and people kind of picked that apart, because of the earwax or whatever,
Yeah,
you know, what would that hygienically be like? Yeah, but
especially
that was
Steve.
one of his selling points was, yeah, you could, share your other AirPod with a friend.
Should
By the
I?
way, did I go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, no, I was gonna say, should I buy this AirFly? I'm thinking about getting it now.
It works really well.
Yeah.
It works really, really well. And it holds a charge for a long time. So, it would definitely make it through your flight. And it's just no fuss, no muss. It's just great. It's a great product. So we're
Yeah.
talking about the AirFly from 12 South, where you plug it into the headphone jack on the plane, and magically your AirPods will connect via Bluetooth.
Yeah. Chris in the
Speaking
chat
of,
mentioned he uses it too, so that's good.
yeah,
All right, go ahead.
all right, ringing endorsements all the way around from the
Yeah.
Apple community. We could, the other thing I was going to say was that we just dropped one of our daughters off at music camp, and one of the great things about them going, she's going to be there for 2 weeks, is they take their phones, or you don't come in with a phone. So we have her
Yeah.
phone. It's not like they take the phones.
Oh wow.
So for her, that's like cold turkey. That's
Yeah.
she's probably in a sweat right now, and it's not from the heat. But what I was able to hook her up with was an iPod that I had mentioned this on the show, I don't know, like 4 years ago, that if you have an old iPod, you can take it apart, and for very little money, you put in a flash board, so you can stick in a flash card, you remove the hard drive, you can put in a brand new battery, and you snap that thing back together, and now it holds thousands and thousands of songs, just
Super cool.
depending on how big how many flashcards. There's one where you can buy like a quad, so you can actually put in 4 flashcards and make it like this extreme library. Now, the only downside to that is it still works with the modern Mac, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's a desktop or portable. The iPod will mount. You can see all your songs. You can see your playlists. You can put books on there. You can create playlists. So it all still seamlessly works, which is kind of remarkable that that actually is the case. The only thing is it's still AAC. So that's about the best audio quality you could get,
Yeah.
which is still better than MP3, and it's not horrible. And there's some aftermarket products like the AirFly where you could just plug it into the headphone jack, and then you could use it with your AirPods. So it's a kind of a cool little old school thing. And so she took it with her to camp. She said she didn't think anybody brought an MP3 player with them, in the past,
Yeah.
because she's been there other years, which is really kind of weird when you think about it, because like take ourselves like 20 years ago, right? If you went to a camp and you wouldn't have had a phone anyway, but you brought your MP3 player with you, and it might have been an
Yeah.
iPod.
Wait, so that's not considered contraband? Like at the camp, she has some kind of digital device with her?
Well, no, because it's not connected to anything. There's no
All right, just
Wi-Fi. It's
checking, just
just
checking.
so I'm not talking about the phones that
Yeah, I
were
know, I know.
doubled as I'm talking about the old click wheel. That's what she's got. She's using the best ones, by the way, if you're really into this and you just heard this, the best ones to get are the 5th gen, and then it's like there was a 5.5 version. So it came out mid-year because that has the best converter, D to A converter, digital to analog converter. So if you're looking for the best sound with your earbuds, your wired earbuds, the 5th gen is the best.
And how much would those go for these days if you were to buy a used one?
On the used market, I've seen them for like on Facebook Marketplace. There was one just recently. I was going to see if I could get it for cheaper because now I just like doing these.
Yeah.
Like I don't know, like less than $100.
Oh, okay.
But then you need to take it apart. You need to, some will still work with the old hard drive, but the old hard drive might hold 30 gigs. So that's still significant. But when you think about it, you could put your whole music library on these things. I mean, like Steve used to say in the day, it's a great thing to have.
I'm thinking this is a new side business, Jerry. You just like
There's already people doing this.
Yeah, well, there's always room for competition.
Yeah, they're hard to get. They're hard to get in good condition. Sometimes you can get them and they're kind of janky where they just don't work because they've been dropped and abused. Plus, think of all that time that's elapsed since they've been out. So,
sure.
There's people that do this and that do okay with it, but a handful of businesses.
That's actually
But if you're interested in this, you can go look on Reddit and you look for like the classic iPod. What does Reddit call those? Threads?
Subreddits?
Subreddits. Yeah, there we go.
Look at that. I know some terms.
Yeah, you're like a young kid.
I don't know. Some of the terminology of these kids these days, I won't even go down that road. It's crazy. So I met up with an insurance guy and he said he just a side note that he had a Zoom meeting with a new employee, and the new employee told him like, hey, you got the Riz, no cap, or something like that. He was like, what? He's like, why would you even say that in a business setting to someone? Like, it was just the weirdest thing ever.
Can you translate that for me, for an old guy like me? Do you know what that means?
I think if you got the Riz, I think you're cool, and no cap, I think means you're not lying.
So it doesn't mean like you're capped at having the Riz. I would think like no cap means like you're just like off the chart Riz.
This is such a horrible conversation for anyone that knows this language, and like these guys are so old. I think it's no cap is I'm not lying. Someone in the chat help me out, but I think that's what it means. We can use Google Translate for that.
I think our demographic skews a little bit, in the older people. Except that's, if young Joe were here, he would probably know.
I wonder if he would. We have to ask him.
Yeah, we'll ask him on the next show.
Yeah.
No cap.
That's pretty funny. Well, as we start to approach our wrap-up time, I'm not sure what you have left, but I have something real quick that I wanted to chat about. I don't think I talked about this, but I was struggling to find a way to total up my client numbers so that I could easily bill properly. Mm-hmm. And maybe people have much better ways, but I didn't. So like, for instance, we bill per Microsoft license and we bill per computer in the MDM in question. And you can go into the MDMs and grab this data. Anyway, long story short is Hudu, which you turned me on to, has some great integrations. So I put in the integration with Microsoft. So through 365, I have an integration there where each client now pulls in the Microsoft licenses. And then it has an integration with Watchman as well. And it pulled in the data of the computers per client and Watchman. I just had to do a lineup because the client names were slightly different. So I had to make sure that they lined up properly. Mm-hmm. But for me, this was actually really huge because now when we have to total things up, instead of logging into an MDM instance or logging into their Microsoft instance, I do it all in Hudu now. where it's just cataloged and I quickly go total for this, total for that, done. And I move on to the next client. So again, if people have better ways, this might be rudimentary to you, but this was actually huge for me. So I wanted to share it too.
Yeah, no, that's a good tip. And of course, the Hudu product is mostly for documentation. And I always know that there's going to be like a day of reckoning where I'm just going to need to really come up with some documentation for a client who's on their way out or just wants to get that from me. And I don't want to be scrambling. So, I'm building my Hudu instance, slowly but surely. And a lot of times I just let it wither on the vine and I don't really go in there. But, whatever I'm paying for that yearly service of them hosting my Hudu instance, I feel it's worth it because there's a particular company that just keeps on improving and they have small add-ons along the way and just a really good value there. So if you're struggling with documentation, this is the product to get, or at least to look at seriously. I'm sure there's others that are even better, but at this price point, at Jerry's price point.
At Jerry's price point. Well, Jerry's price point would be free, but
most times to say like, hey, I'm on a podcast. Can I have your product for free? which doesn't seem to work these days. By the way, they actually were saying recently, I heard some noted podcasters talking that podcast revenue is going back up, but we wouldn't know about that because we rely on you, the listener, to go to Patreon. As you know, we're not flooding you with all kinds of barrage advertisements. So one last little thing to leave you with. One of my anchor store clients, one of their people reached out to me. She was having trouble using, I have all my clients who are using Ubiquiti products now using Teleport, which is built into the Wi-Fi Man, which is the VPN. And that works so well because it's just a terrific way to deploy VPN to groups of people. So anyway, so they said we were having trouble. So I got on the phone and I was speaking with somebody named Piper, and like she's like, yeah, Grace has a problem too. Like, can you reach out to Grace? And I'm like, okay. So I get the email and she's like, hey, I've got a problem. And I'm like, okay, let's see what we can do. Because it's basically we hook them up to their phone Wi-Fi hotspot to test if we can, through the Wi-Fi hotspot, if we can VPN into this Synology disk station. This is essentially what we're doing through Teleport. Yeah. So I'll spare you the blow by blow, but I log into the computer. I can't log into the computer. And the computer shows that it's online and then it's off. And I'm trying to use live desktop with Adigy. And she's like, no, it's, and I'm like, oh, I can't connect. All right. So I send her a link to SOS Splashtop. She downloads that. She gives me the number. I can't connect to the computer. I don't know what's going on. And this goes like 30 minutes elapses. So finally, I forget how I discovered this. I said, let me look. And I'm looking in Adigy, and I forget exactly how this played out, but I said, why does the name of the computer say Debbie? She goes, well, this is Debbie. I heard you call me Grace, but I didn't want to correct you. So this whole time I'm trying to connect to somebody else's computer that wasn't online, might have been online, was going on and offline. I had no idea what I was doing. I'm like, this has never happened before. And I'm apologizing to her. Like, this is so weird. And she's like, it's the wrong person.
I heard you call me Grace, but she just kept going with it. Oh, that is freaking classic, dude.
Yeah, that's never happened to me. Like, it's just like it's the weirdest thing.
Oh, thank you for that. That was just so good. Oh my God.
Well, I'll have you take us out, Sam, on an up note.
No, it's been a pleasure. I think we showed the people that we have some chemistry here, Jerry.
We got a little chemistry,
did it, right? We got a little.
I think if we practice,
not like you and Joe, but that's okay.
No. Not enough to have a secret podcast show, but
yeah, secret squirrel show. But it's been a pleasure, Jerry. No cap. I wanted to say thank you for hanging out, and join us next week on Command Control Power. Let's close it out, Jay-Z. You know how to end the stream?
I'm trying. I'm clicking on the goddamn thing. It won't end.
Oh, I know how it
Well,
works.